Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Monique Lacoste, who is the co-chair of the Manitoba 150 Hosts Committee, for joining me this morning. I also want to say a special thank you to co-chair Stu Murray and to all their team for their tremendous work on Manitoba 150. As you all know, this year marks our province's 150th anniversary of joining Confederation. Cette année marque le 150e anniversaire de l'adhésion de la Confédération à notre province. Many activities and events to commemorate this very significant milestone and a time. It's a time to focus our efforts. It's a time to protect our most vital service, our healthcare system, and our most vulnerable citizens as well. So the health and the well-being of every Manitoban has been and is going to continue to be our #1 priority above all else. And so for that reason, we will press pause on the Manitoba 150 celebrations. By postponing the remaining Manitoba 150 events, such as the Unite 150 concert, Manitobans will have the opportunity to fully enjoy these special occasions when we're out on the other side of this pandemic, and boy, will we have something to celebrate at that time. We'll beat this thing together. And I look forward to welcoming Manitobans and Canadians from here and from abroad, back home, when we can safely celebrate together all that Manitoba has to offer, and we have so much to offer. I want to ask Monique to say a few words about this, and I say again to Monique and her whole team and Stu that we thank you all, Manitobans, thank you for your amazing work, and we really appreciate everything that you've done for us, and will continue to do in the coming months and years. Monique?
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre, de nous inviter aujourd'hui. Je suis vraiment très heureuse de représenter le comité Manitoba 150 aujourd'hui. Before beginning, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 1 territory, the land of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dene, and Dakota peoples. It's also the homeland of the Métis Nation, of which I am a proud citizen. I sit here on behalf of a team, Manitoba 150 team, led by co-chair Stuart Murray, as the Premier said, our President and CEO Jason Smith, a volunteer board and staff, and many sponsors and partners. And so we'd like to thank you, Mr. Premier, and Minister Kathy Cox as well, for their leadership and their continued support of Manitoba 150. And we wholeheartedly support the Premier's decision to pause our celebration. Of course, it's the right thing to do at this time. Our main focus has to be the health and safety of Manitobans and, of course, our economy. And our thoughts go out to everyone who is helping keeping us safe right now. That includes frontline workers, our public servants as well, and our elected officials. Nous avons invité les Manitobains d'être unis dans la fête en 2020. Et voilà que nous sommes plutôt unis dans la lutte contre la COVID-19. Et donc, ce qu'il faut faire en ce moment, c'est rester chez soi. Et donc, les célébrations de Manitoba 150 sont en suspens pour le moment, mais nous savons que cette pandémie va se terminer. Et quand le jour viendra, en 2021, nous serons prêts avec une célébration sans précédent. While all of Manitoba 150's remaining events and public events are being postponed, funding will remain in place to support community projects and events just as soon as public health advises it's safe to do so in 2021. So we invited Manitobans to be united in celebration in 2020, and instead here we are, united in the fight against COVID-19, and that means staying home. So our celebrations are on hold, but the pandemic will end, and as the Premier said, when it does, we're going to be ready with a celebration like no other. We promise it'll be worth the wait, and Premier, as my friend Stuart Murray likes to say, it's going to be epic.
Thanks so much, Monique.
Merci.
And obviously, we're appreciative of all your work, and we really are looking forward to the coming celebration. We'll have even more to celebrate than we had in the past. So, thanks, Monique. Again. I want to say also thank you to the many generous sponsors across the province. We have such a wonderful, giving and supportive community in our province, and those folks who have stepped up and sponsored, stepped up to the plate to help us celebrate, deserve our real appreciation and support as well, and many of them are facing their own challenges right now as well. We are going to flatten the COVID curve, and as we do, we're going to ensure that all of us and our loved ones have a healthy Manitoba today and for many generations to come. And one of the things we have to look forward to is this great celebration next year, when we're going to party like it was 2020 in 2021. Manitoba's been the home of hope for over 150 years, and we will continue to be the home of hope. So thank you again, and we'll take questions on this. And I should mention to my friends in the media that we'll just take, I believe, one question from each, and then I have another announcement to make, and we'll let Monique not watch wieners be made here. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Premier. From the Winnipeg Free Press, Larry.
Premier, if I may, I'd like to ask a question about unemployment. And Premier Kenney this week said that unemployment in Alberta was at 25% or would be. Have you done any such projections in Manitoba?
Yeah, as part of the Canadian family, watching Premier Kenney, who is a friend of mine, talking about 25% unemployment had an incredible sadness to it. I think all of us in Manitoba have friends and family members who live in Alberta and who were facing amazing challenges before the pandemic came. So now they're facing an imperfect storm, if you will, of other challenges as well. And so it's our hearts go out to them, and our love and support go out to them as well. Manitoba is not in that position. Manitoba will be among the leading jurisdictions to bounce back from the pandemic. We have an incredibly diverse economy. We have an amazing sense of community. We have people who are very, very strongly committed to our province, who are going to continue to invest here and going to shop here and going to support their friends and neighbors here. And we have taken necessary steps in many categories already to begin to prepare for this recovery. So there is a real challenge here for all Canadian provinces, and there is one for Manitoba as well, but not to the degree that Alberta is facing right now.
Okay. From Global, Brittany.
Good morning, Brittany from Global News here. Premier Pallister, you've said that this is not the time to be celebrating. This is the time to be putting a pause on events. We're still seeing a lot of Manitobans not putting a pause on these events, and you've spoken very sternly about that. When can we start to see enforcement coming, and what's it going to look like?
That's a great question, Brittany, and it's a sad one. We all know it's our obligation to defend one another and ourselves in this process, and most Manitobans are stepping up to the plate and doing exactly that. However, the reality is laws aren't made for those vast majority of people who abide by reasonable definitions of moral conduct. They're made for people who don't, and so deterrents are necessary. So as I undertook, I believe 2 days ago, we're moving forward with an initial ticketing plan. We will need approval from the other parties I'll deal with that in a moment, but we'll need approval from the other parties to actually regiment that. Nonetheless, we're looking at an active effort to put out warnings at the very least in the short term, and something stronger than that, which we'll share with you in due course if necessary later. I would hope it isn't necessary, but it's pretty evident that for some people, they're either living in a cave or just so selfish that they don't have an understanding of their impact on other people and on this planet. And so we're going to need to take necessary steps to protect all of us from that kind of conduct.
From the Brandon Sun, Drew.
Thank you. This is Drew from the Brandon Sun. Monique, perhaps you can just clarify, but what's going to be happening with the Build 150 and Celebrate 150 grant funding exactly?
Well, as you can imagine, our board has been preparing over the past few weeks, working remotely and having teleconferences to ensure that we can think about alternatives to what we had planned, knowing that COVID was a rapidly evolving situation. So we were focused mainly on Unite 150 at the time, first looking at an August date. Now it's definitely put off to 2021. Certainly Build 150 and Celebrate 150 are programs where we funded activities, often partially activities that were going to be run by other community groups and events and communities themselves. So we are in constant contact with them, and and we will be working with them to see what this announcement today means to them and how we will coordinate that going forward. But clearly, the message is today that Manitoba 150 will be celebrated in 2021.
From CJOB, Diana.
Good morning, Mr. Premier. It's Diana from 680 CJOB. I know today, of course, you're speaking about Manitoba 150 celebrations. We've got other celebrations coming up right now. We've got Passover and Easter happening. What would you say to people who are still a little bit unsure of those guidelines on gathering for Easter? I know we've heard from Dr. Roussin that you shouldn't be getting together with family, but there still is that guideline about having a maximum of 10 people gathering. What do you say to Manitobans who are still kind of considering getting together with families for these holidays?
Well, a couple of things. I should back up a second and assure all the community groups that we're planning to do 150 celebrations that up to a maximum of 50% of funding, apart from those events already having occurred, of course, who have their full funding. But for future events, we'll be, as a province or through our Crown corporations and other agencies that the government is attached to, we'll be ensuring that they're able to recoup a lot of their costs. And so they're repositioned to do an even better job in the coming year so we can all bounce into the celebrations in the coming year. On the issue of Passover, of Easter, I want to be very clear with all Manitoba families. Obviously, this is a tremendously emotional time of year for many families. This is a time that's precious to many families. Understand that gathering also allows COVID potentially to move when you move. And please remember that, and remember that we need these celebrations to happen next year with everyone at them. And we don't need to share in the dangers of transmitting COVID among our families, among our church congregations, in larger groups. Follow the doctor's advice. Stay at home. Celebrate remotely if you can. Obviously, stay in touch with loved ones and family, but do not gather together and give each other a smaller celebration in the coming year than need be the case.
From the Winnipeg Sun, James.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm just wondering if there are any creative ways to get this message out, particularly social distancing, to people who might not have access to social media and even television.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, James. I think there's clearly I've had good conversations with the regional chiefs and provincial chief on the issues of remote and northern communities. In part, not all communities are Indigenous, but nonetheless, some of them do not have broadband services, although we've expanded and focused on expanding broadband around the province. Some do not have extensive broadband access, and that is an issue. Nonetheless, word of mouth is pretty clear out there from what I'm hearing from the chiefs. The communities are well aware. Some of them have even taken steps to try to protect their communities through checks at the entrances and quasi-blockades, if you will, around their communities. So I think that those initiatives are very much underway, and I've really appreciated the dialogue the chiefs have shared with my ministers and myself in returning the favor that we have returned to them and of reaching out. They have reached back. And so we're confident that the word is out there. It's just getting the people to follow that word that is the operative issue, and that's where some of what I'll talk about in the second part of my announcement is relevant in that respect.
From CBC Radio-Canada, Patrick.
Bonjour, vous deux. Patrick Foucault, Radio-Canada. I would have a French question for Madame Lacoste. Bonjour, Madame Lacoste. Est-ce qu'on pourrait entrevoir au courant de l'année, par exemple, des célébrations en ligne, donc des façons de célébrer en ligne, par exemple, avec des concerts en ligne? Est-ce que vous pourriez répondre à cette question-là en français et en anglais par la...
Oui, merci beaucoup, Patrick. C'est sûr que COVID-19 a fait que le comité organisateur a dû déjà rajuster le tir en cours de route et que ce n'est pas terminé. On a encore beaucoup de discussions à avoir pour voir comment est-ce qu'on peut modifier la programmation. Je pense que l'annonce d'aujourd'hui nous permet d'anticiper cependant la certitude que les fêtes en personne, la possibilité de rassembler les Manitobains demeure. C'est juste qu'on va repousser en 2021. Est-ce que ça veut dire qu'on pourrait imaginer d'ici la fin de cette année des moyens créatifs de rassembler les gens, comme vous le dites, en ligne et des choses comme ça? Possiblement, mais évidemment, nous allons vraiment rester braqués sur notre objectif primaire qui est de rassembler les Manitobains lorsque le temps viendra, une fois que la pandémie sera terminée. And so the question was whether we could anticipate some online activities in the wake of COVID-19. And what I just said in French was, it's a great idea to give Manitobans opportunities to celebrate their province. That's what Manitoba 150 is all about, actually, is about giving Manitobans an opportunity to take stock and to celebrate all the great things about our province. We can do that remotely. We can do that on social media. But our focus is really on planning activities for 2021, continuing on with the celebrations and seeing how COVID might modify that. So that's what our focus will be in the coming weeks.
Don't think that you asked that question in French to someone other than me. It's obvious. It's obvious you're tired of hearing my débutant français.
From 102.9 CHTM, Navi.
Good morning. My question is for Monique Lacoste. What would this announcement need for like the legacy projects or the Build 150 projects? Are those also being postponed to next year as well? Could you just provide clarification on that?
It's too soon for me to answer that question today. Certainly, having made the announcement today, we fully support the Premier's decision to postpone our activities for now. What does that mean for the Build 150 and the Celebrate programs specifically? Our board and our staff will be looking at that in the coming weeks, and we'll be communicating with everyone to let them know exactly, how we anticipate this new announcement will affect their programs and their activities.
As we face this pandemic together, what is evident to me is that we're creating even more Manitoba heroes with every passing day. And I think that it's important to acknowledge so many of you have stepped up and done so much for others. So thank you. When we celebrate, we'll celebrate well, and we'll celebrate the heroes of our province. We have more coming up all the time.
From CBC Manitoba, Bart.
Mr. Premier Brian Pallister of CBC, you have stated in the past that people want to know when this will end, and of course you can't say that, but can you give Manitobans a clear indication in the short term how much longer physical distancing measures will last? And just a bit more context, we're beginning to see some evidence that distancing measures in Western provinces may be making inroads in flattening the curve. That said, epidemiologists want to see those distancing measures in place for many, many months. Can you give Manitobans an idea, minimum number of months, that physical distancing measures will be in place?
Well, I want to be really clear that the social distancing is working and is going to work. As Dr. Roussin and others have said, it is a key aspect of how we are going to flatten this curve. I was talking to the Easter Bunny actually yesterday on this, and the Easter Bunny is practicing social distancing. I want the kids out there to know that. The Easter Bunny is very, very conscious of the need to do this, not to transmit this COVID. Be very, very careful. I've also understanding that Santa Claus as well is doing this, and I think it's important to understand social distancing is key. Now, we're hopeful, of course, that by Christmas this isn't necessary, Bartley, but the fact is it's necessary right now, and we're seeing our citizens, we're seeing key people stepping up and doing their part, and kids, you need to do your part too.
From CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
Oh, hi, Mr. Premier, Jeff, CTV. You talked about a ticketing plan starting with warnings and a stronger enforcement later on. Can you give us an idea how much fines will be and who will do the enforcement?
I may be able to give you that tomorrow. We're refining the details right now, Jeff. If I can't do it tomorrow, we'll do it Monday at the latest, or Tuesday, I'm sorry. But you have to understand, we're standing up something here we've never had to do before. And we have to do it right, and we have to do it respectfully, and we have to do it according to constitutional prerequisites. So I think all of us understand, sadly, the need for this additional security to be offered, and we understand that it needs to be a deterrent to people, and that sadly, despite all evidence to the contrary, there is a real need for people to get the message, and sometimes hitting the pocketbook is the way you do that. So that's where we're going with this. None of us like to have to do it, and I am always reminded as I watch people adhering to the social distancing and respecting one another, how proud I am of them, and frankly, it's that vast majority of people that we deserve to commend, while at the same time taking actions to discourage the profoundly small minority of people who aren't thinking properly.
From the Canadian Press, Steve.
Hi, Premier Steve Lambert from the Canadian Press. According to my layman's eye, the Public Health Act allows for fines of up to $50,000 already for people who fail to comply with a public health order. So if that is already in the Act, if I am reading that correctly, why is that not being enforced right now?
Well, I suppose there's a real question about the detail that we're going to be rolling out, Steve, which I can't answer for you until it's firmed up. I can only say that handing out a $50,000 fine to an individual for being too close to their children and dog while someone's in contact with them isn't going to be met with very much public receptivity. So we have to stand up an enforcement mechanism that can work, that is designed around this pandemic. What you're reading is an act that was not written with the pandemic in mind.
From City News, Stephanie.
Hello, Mr. Premier. Stephanie Lipsky with City News. I know you can't get too much into it, but with this initial ticketing plan, would it be health inspectors or Winnipeg Police who would be at the front lines of that?
I'll have more to say on that in due course. What we want to make sure of is that it works, that it's a deterrent to people who are thoughtlessly not abiding by the social distancing requirements and are placing themselves and others at risk, and that it is enforceable.
From CTV News National Bureau in Winnipeg, Jill.
Good morning. With the celebrations canceled until next year, and frankly, bringing Santa into this discussion actually makes me a little bit nervous. The Prime Minister today spoke at length about, going back. Canada's going to look different, he was saying, but in the weeks to come, we'll have to start looking at how we can become a working society again. What kind of timeline are you looking at, Premier, and have you had discussions with the federal government about this?
Well, first of all, on the issue of Santa and your nervousness, I would say based on your conduct, Jill, I don't think you would need to worry about Santa visiting anyway. That being said, for our economy to recover, there are a number of things that have to happen. I would say, first of all, we're planning for a number of those things right now. We're looking at a variety of the key industries in our province and how we can work with them to propel them back to success. We have set up a couple of subcommittees. I can give you more information on those at a later date that are working with industry participants right now so that we're able to adapt in an agile way to get back up and running. In the meantime, we have to stay focused on protecting the health and well-being of our citizens. That is uppermost in everybody's mind, and that's where we're going to stay focused. I'm getting a hand signal here that I need to say thank you again to Monique for joining us today, and I do again say thank you, Monique, to you and your whole team for the tremendous work you've done. Pressing pause on 150 is not the easy thing to do, but it is the right and smart thing to do, and we know that. And so again, let's get excited about what's coming. we are going to beat this thing, and we're going to do it together. And thanks so much, Monique, to you.
Thank you. Merci.
Very briefly, friends, I wanted to share with you that we will be calling the Legislative Assembly back on Wednesday, April the 15th. I have asked my House Leader, Mr. Kelvin Gertzen, to continue his negotiation with the opposition. It is necessary and important that we meet, subject to all the safety requirements that we can possibly adhere to through our meeting, but to do the work of preparing ourselves, we will need to meet one day to free up literally billions of dollars to support frontline health workers and our healthcare system. We will need to act together to make it easier for retired health professionals to come back to work. We will need to adopt measures to ensure that Manitobans have financial flexibility they need during these uncertain times. Some of those measures have been announced but require the approval of our legislature to enact them. And I would say all of the measures that we will be introducing and that we will ask our colleagues to approve next week are focused on protecting our most vulnerable citizens and our most vulnerable systems of protecting those vulnerable citizens as well. I would also caution members of the other parties that this is not the time for partisanship. This is the time to remain focused together on pandemic response and to enact the measures necessary to ensure that we're protecting Manitoba citizens as best as we possibly can. We anticipate that we can achieve agreement with the opposition parties to have the Legislative Assembly populated with social distancing measures being utilized by having 1/3 of members present in the chamber. This will allow measures to be adopted with quorum and also protect the health and well-being of not only members of the Legislative Assembly, but also of our staff here and the people who work in the legislative building. I would emphasize to Manitobans, these measures are necessary in order for us to continue the business of governing the province of Manitoba. They are being taken with due consideration to the health and well-being of all who must come here to serve their constituents. And I would close my brief remarks by saying a special thank you to all of the members of the Legislative Assembly who have been stepping up and doing significant work, as have members of their staff teams, and to say to them, thank you for your work on behalf of Manitobans. Your work is appreciated. I am getting comments from Manitobans saying how much that is the case. So I say that in the spirit of cooperation to all elected members of the Legislative Assembly. And our plan, as I said again, is to reconvene next Wednesday and to continue with the business of government in every respect, with a focus specifically on the pandemic itself.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. We will go back through our reporter roster now. From the Winnipeg Free Press, Larry.
Premier, Larry Kush of the Winnipeg Free Press. We've had several provinces give projections now on COVID cases and deaths. Alberta, Quebec, and Ontario, Saskatchewan is scheduled to do so today. Is Manitoba going to do that this week?
I understand the health department's working on some projections. Larry, you know my reluctance on this. It's not a question of not wanting Manitobans to know everything. It's a question of us knowing within reasonable parameters what is likely. And because we're dealing with an unprecedented event, we have developed a system of analysis which gives us some idea, but it's very, very broad. I wouldn't want Manitobans unduly alarmed, so I say this. We will be sharing that information. I believe Cameron Friesen and his officials are pulling the final projections together, but I would say with caution to Manitobans. You've seen projections released in other provinces in the United States, and immediately, unfortunately, some reports and focused reports in the media emphasize the maximum number of deaths that could occur. Some will argue that this is prudent and wise because it will scare people. I would argue that what you need is, as much as possible, honest projections. So that's what we're working on. Others, to a lesser degree, may be doing that. I believe Manitobans, in most cases, are acting appropriately and are plenty scared as it is about the reality of this situation without having, unnecessarily adding to it. That being said, those numbers are being pulled together as you've asked.
From Global, Brittany.
Good morning, Mr. Premier. My question is on the retired nurses and doctors that you guys are looking to have come back. Do you have any idea how many have already vested interest in this and how soon we could see some of those coming back after you meet in the Legislative Assembly on the 15th?
That's a fair question, Brittany. I've just got a verbal update that there's been a good response. I don't have science to back it. I'll have the information made available through either Dr. Roussin or through our health minister so that you can have a look at the responses. But I would also say this is one of the reasons we need to call back the legislature, because we need to enact rules which will allow us to bring back trained health professionals to our front line. We're going to need their help, and I understand it is forthcoming, but I'm sorry I don't have the detail on it right here.
From the Brandon Sun, Drew.
Thank you. This is Drew at the Brandon Sun. Mr. Premier, on the province's request for proposal for temporary hospitals in Winnipeg, Brandon, Thompson, with those opening, are you confident that the province has the nurses and other healthcare staff to actually man those facilities?
Yes, but at the same time, we've already seen some instances of COVID infecting frontline health workers, and I'm very concerned about that. And so that's why we were the first online with the federal purchasing on protective equipment. That's why we initiated some weeks ago additional measures to secure even more backup equipment for our frontline workers. We want our frontline workers protected. So my only qualification would be we're continuing to battle that, as every other jurisdiction across Canada and around the world is. Securing that protective equipment for our frontline health workers is a big deal. On the issue of capacity, we believe it's there, yeah.
From CJOB, Diana.
Diana from 680 CJOB. Mr. Premier, the feds have announced adjustments today to some of their programs to help businesses. What, if any, adjustments are you looking at on programs already announced, or are you looking at any other aid to help people or businesses kind of falling through the cracks right now?
Yeah, more to say on that tomorrow. I actually have an announcement on that specific issue tomorrow, but I would say this. I thank and congratulate the federal government for the couple of supportive programs they've put out. We have announced a raft of programs to deal with a variety of issues, ranging from tenants to people living check to check, to bills potentially that might cause additional stress to people, that where we've launched forgiveness or extension, I should say, of interest, deferral of payments, a raft of measures that we have taken to assist in helping give, I won't say a heightened sense of confidence, but at least less of a reduced sense of confidence to Manitobans. Certainly, we've also taken measures to protect those who might fear that their inability to pay would cause them to be without power. These are measures that we've undertaken in addition to others previously undertaken to reduce the tax burden on all our citizens with respect to reduced income tax, sales tax, small business taxes, and so on. So our province is much better positioned now than it was a few years ago, not only with reduced tax burden and more money in the hands of working families, but also in respect of the close to $1 billion that we were able to set aside over the last 4 years that allows us now to be able to afford to do a number of the things that we would have had to borrow from our children to do in the absence of such savings. This strengthening of our province's financial situation is helping now, and it will help on a go-forward basis as well to make sure that we're the most resilient of provinces.
From the Winnipeg Sun, James.
Mr. Premier, I'm just wondering if you know the status of COVID-19 vaccine research in Manitoba and other jurisdictions, and is there any hope that you're seeing?
Well, there's always hope, and in this instance, I think there's even more. We have some incredible expertise right here in Manitoba that is working on this issue, and I like the fact that you've raised this question because it gives me the opportunity to say, as much as we're all up to our, our armpits and alligators right now, your government, and I hope many Manitobans, is thinking about what happens after this, and we are planning already for resilience in respect of many strategies that will position us to bounce back very well. Looking for a cure is obviously better than searching the globe for more masks, and so we have to do both of them right now, not just look for masks. So we're engaging in shared research and initiatives that will help us in finding cures, and we are also engaging in partnerships, as you know, through significant investments to find ways to produce what we need here in Manitoba with the acumen and entrepreneurship we have in abundance here in Manitoba.
From CBC Radio Canada, Patrick.
Bonjour, M. Pallister, Patrick Foucault, Radio Canada. Is it in the plan to put out a request to the federal government to ask for military help for Northern First Nations in Manitoba?
À ce moment présent, non. L'assistance militaire, ce n'est pas nécessaire maintenant. C'est une pas de probabilité, Patrick. Peut-être une possibilité. Une inondation, c'est une condition différente, mais le prévoir pour le niveau d'eau, Manitoba, c'est créer un optimisme. Je suis un optimiste normalement. Et autres provinces, la belle province Québec, peut-être c'est nécessaire, mais pour Manitoba, je dis non.
From CHTM, Navi.
Hello again, Navi Ball with CHTM. I just wanted to ask in regards to information in regards to COVID-19 and how it's being delivered to Manitobans who are visually impaired. I was wondering if the province is considering different measures or a different way of getting that message delivered to visually impaired Manitobans at this time.
It's a great and fair question, Navi. I don't have an answer for you. I'll consult with Dr. Roussin and the health minister and see if there are issues that need to be addressed in that respect, and I appreciate you raising it.
From CBC Manitoba, Bart.
Mr. Premier, I'm going to assume that your response to my previous question was serious. Are you saying that social distancing measures are going to be in place until December 25th?
I'm not into predictions right now in respect of social distancing measures, Bart. I am very cognizant that this is one of the most significant and important necessities that we have to face up to do our part to protect ourselves and to protect one another. And I am very focused, as I hope all Manitobans are, or most certainly should be, that we do our part to flatten this COVID curve and ensure that we have a health system that can provide care in every respect for every ailment, every injury, not just be overly focused on COVID. So for many people right now, there's the reality of deferred surgeries, of delays. Those realities as a consequence of this pandemic are ones we have to face. The sooner that we all do our part to flatten the curve of COVID, the sooner that our friends and neighbors can regain the use of the service that they value most, which is their healthcare system, and that it can be there sustainably for them when they need it.
From CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
I asked about a minimum amount, Mr. Premier.
Sorry, Jeff, I just got the last part of your question.
That was actually still me, Mr. Premier, Bartley here. I was asking you, based on the fact that epidemiologists say that distancing would have to continue if we flatten the curve, to give a minimum amount that you think these most strict distancing measures will be in place.
I think I've addressed your question fully, Bart. I'll take the next question.
I beg to disagree.
From CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
Oh, hi. You said, Mr. Premier, you'll need a day to release billions of dollars. Are you planning to come back to session to the legislature for one day, or any days, weeks? What are you looking at? Can you give us a timeline?
Yeah, we believe that with the cooperation of the opposition parties, we can deal with the raft of measures that are necessary in a day. And we also understand that given the competing nature of the health requirements we have to address right now for people who work here and for our Legislative Assembly elected and unelected personnel, that it would be wise to deal with these issues in one day in one setting. So that's what we're asking the opposition to do. As far as the reference to billions of dollars, that is quite correct. We are asking for support to make available billions of dollars to address this pandemic, and to move forward, we need that support from the Legislative Assembly.
From the Canadian Press, Steve.
Hi, Mr. Pallister, Steve Lambert from the Canadian Press. I'm going to follow up on my earlier question. The Public Health Act includes provisions for fines of up to $50,000 and up to 6 months in jail, the way I read it. That's not a minimum, it's a maximum. Mm-hmm. So I'm unclear as to why you need the opposition or any legislative changes to start issuing fines.
It'll be clear to you when we convene, if not sooner, Steve, and we'll make it clear to you, and you'll be able to report on it when we make it clear to you. In the meantime, what should be clear to all is that we're embarking on an effort to get people to abide by the social distancing rules and other rules that are necessary to protect the well-being of all of us, that there will be warnings issued, and that we are enshrining some more detail into these measures so that we're facilitating the ability to do this on, sadly, an ongoing basis until it would be my hope that everyone would get on the team and not make it necessary.
From City News, Stephanie.
Mr. Premier, Stephanie Wilsuk with City News. Just wondering if you can expand on the 1/3 of members who will sit on Wednesday. Is there going to be an option for a virtual way for other members, or how will the 1/3 be decided?
Well, the opposition House leaders are in discussion, I expect, as we speak with our House leader. They may have some innovative suggestions. Some have been utilized in other provinces, I understand. The discussion around virtual sitting has been advanced in some areas. I'm not sure of the uptake. That isn't what we envision here. What we envision is that we'll get agreement to have 1/3 of the representatives of each political party in the chamber so that we can maintain social distancing at this point. And as far as the briefings on a variety of the initiatives we're bringing forward, the opposition parties will be having that information if they don't have it already.
from CTV National, Jill.
Hello, Premier. It's Bill Macashon with CTV National again. I'm just following up on Larry's first question. When it comes to projections and modeling, when can we expect to see that information?
Jill, I should mention I was just handed a note here, and Santa has said that you don't need to worry. Apparently, you're on his list, so good news for you. As far as the modeling is concerned, I'll leave that to Dr. Roussin and the Health Minister. My understanding is that work has been undertaken. I am of a mind that it is near completion and so should be very close to being released to you and to Manitobans. I would only add again the cautions that this is a unique situation, that the projections are a guess, that there will be a broad range, and that I would not want these projections to be utilized to add to the fears already very evident and present in the households of many Manitobans who are facing incredible stresses right now with job loss, with reduced incomes, with expenses and ongoing challenges, with children that they care deeply about and that are underfoot right now in their homes. This is not the time to add to stress unnecessarily. So I would not want any projection to be used in that manner, and rather I would hope that in releasing the information that perhaps it can be used to give not a heightened sense of insecurity, but rather a greater sense of confidence that we have considered a variety, and we have considered a variety of possibilities. We're preparing for the worst. We are hoping for something better than that. I want to close by just saying thank you to everybody. Take this opportunity to remind Manitobans, abide by the recommendations of the doctor. Good hygiene, good hand hygiene is critical. Remember, this is a respiratory illness, and there are people around you that have asthma. There are people around you that have lung disorders. There are people around you that young people who are disobeying these rules need to understand. There are people walking by that they could cause grievous harm to. Think about that for a second and understand that there are people out there who you may not know, but if you knew them, you'd love them, care for them, and have enough respect for them to abide by these very common sense measures. Wash your hands on a regular basis, 15 seconds at least. Make sure to dry them. Use an alcohol-based hand cleaner if you can. Clean your hands after coughing or sneezing. When you're caring for someone who is ill, before, during, and after you're preparing food, before eating, when your hands are visibly dirty, of course. Cover your mouth and nose with a tissue when coughing or sneezing. You can cough or sneeze into your sleeve if you have to. Throw used tissues in the garbage. Immediately wash your hands. Avoid close contact. Go 6 feet away from anybody. But remember, there are people out there, vulnerable people, and protect them. Do your job to protect them. Children and adolescents should avoid sharing food and drinks. I've mentioned sippy cups and water bottles. I believe previously I mentioned not sharing musical instruments. And again, I say thanks to Nick for sending me that picture of him and his trombone. For all of us, we're in this together. We can beat this thing. We need to work together as part of a team. Thank you for continuing to do your very best. And together we will beat this thing.